There is a lake in Switzerland, dark as ink, where a boy once stood at the water's edge and felt something vast looking back at him. He could not name it then. He was only 12. But he knew with a certainty that had no words, that beneath the surface of his own mind, beneath the thoughts his teachers approved and the prayers his pastor recited, there moved something older, something that did not belong to him alone. Years later, that boy would become a doctor, a psychiatrist, a student of Sigmund Freud, and then a heretic. Carl Gustav Jung would spend his life mapping the territory he first sensed at that lake, a territory not of neurons or reflexes, but of images, of gods and monsters, of the hero and the witch, the wise man and the child, a territory he would call the collective unconscious. This is not a biography. This is not a theory to memorize. This is an invitation to descend. For 3 hours, we will move together through the architecture of the soul as Jung saw it. We will meet the personas we wear like armor, the shadows we cast and refuse to see, the inner figures, Anima, Animus, self that speak in dreams and myths, and the sudden flashes of meaning that arrive uninvited. We will trace the path he called individuation, the slow, sometimes painful journey toward becoming whole. And we will do so gently, with space to breathe, with silence where silence is needed, because Jung's psychology is not meant to be rushed. It is meant to be lived, felt, dreamed. Let this be a kind of waking dream, a long, deep conversation with the part of you that already knows these things, the part that recognizes the archetype before the name, the symbol before the explanation. You do not need to remember everything. You do not need to take notes. Just listen. Let the words settle. Let the images move through you. Jung once wrote that the psyche is not a machine. It is a living process. It grows, it compensates, it seeks balance even when we do not. And if you fall asleep along the way, that is no accident. Dreams, after all, were his first language. So close your eyes if you wish, or keep them open. Either way, we begin. At the edge of a lake, in the mind of a boy who would one day give us a map of the invisible. Carl Jung was born in 1875 in a small Swiss village where the hills rolled green and the church bells marked the hours. His father was a pastor, a kind man but weary, a man who preached faith while privately drowning in doubt. His mother was different. She had two sides, Jung would later say, one soft and conventional, the other strange and ancient, prone to sudden visions and utterances that came from somewhere else. Jung grew up in that split, between the rational and the numinous, between the dogma of the church and the whispers of something older. He was a lonely child, bookish, prone to daydreams. He spent hours carving a small figure from wood and hiding it in the attic with a painted stone, a secret ritual, a private god. He did not know then that he was practicing what he would later call active imagination, the deliberate conversation with the unconscious. At university, he studied medicine, then psychiatry, the new science of the mind. But the psychiatry of his day was cold, biological. It saw symptoms, diagnoses, categories. Jung saw stories. When he worked at the Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich, he did not just record hallucinations. He listened to them. He asked, "What is this image trying to say? What does the psyche want?" He developed word association tests. He measured reaction times, and he found something startling. Certain words caused emotional storms beneath the surface. Complexes, he called them. clusters of feeling and memory organized around a core wound. This was science. But it was also poetry. And then came Freud. In 1906, Jung read Freud's work on dreams and felt a door open. Here was someone else who believed the unconscious had a language, a purpose. They met the following year. Their first conversation lasted 13 hours. Freud saw in Jung a brilliant son, an heir to psychoanalysis. Jung saw in Freud a father he could finally respect. For 6 years they wrote letters, debated, built a movement together. But beneath the collaboration, a fault line was forming. Freud believed the unconscious was a basement, a cellar full of repressed desires, mostly sexual, always personal. Jung began to suspect it was something else, not a basement, a cathedral. Every great friendship that ends leaves a scar. For Jung, the break with Freud was not just intellectual, it was existential. By 1912, the tension had grown unbearable. Jung had begun to speak of things Freud could not accept. He spoke of symbols that were not simply disguised wishes. He spoke of myths that appeared across cultures without contact. He spoke of a layer of the psyche deeper than childhood, older than memory. Freud called it mysticism, betrayal of the scientific method. Jung called it honesty. The split came slowly, then all at once, a final letter, a severing, and then silence. For Jung, what followed was the most dangerous period of his life. He fell into what he later described as a confrontation with the unconscious. He was not ill, exactly, but he was unmoored. Dreams came in torrents, visions rose unbidden. He saw floods destroying Europe, towers collapsing, blood filling the rivers. This was 1913. War was coming. But Jung did not interpret these images as prophecy. He interpreted them as messages from the depths of the psyche, his psyche, the collective psyche. He began a practice he would continue for years, writing, drawing, painting the images that emerged, dialoguing with them. He built elaborate fantasies, entire mythologies. He called this work his confrontation with the unconscious. Later, it would become the Red Book, and in that descent, he found the foundations of his new psychology. He realized the unconscious is not merely personal. It is not just the repository of your childhood traumas or your forbidden desires. It is also collective, shared, ancient. It contains the psychological heritage of humanity, the images that shaped our ancestors, the patterns that repeat across time and culture. This was analytical psychology, Jung's psychology, no longer Freud's heir, no longer anyone's, his own. What is the psyche? Not the brain, not the mind as a computer, not a list of symptoms. The psyche, in Jung's view, is the totality of all psychological processes, conscious and unconscious, rational and irrational, personal and collective. It is a living system, self-regulating, always seeking balance. Think of it as an ecology. When one part becomes too dominant, another rises to compensate. When consciousness becomes too rigid, the unconscious sends dreams. When logic rules too harshly, intuition whispers. The psyche does not want to be one thing, it wants to be whole. Jung rejected the Cartesian split. Mind versus body, subject versus object, inner versus outer. For him, psyche and world were interwoven. The inner life shaped perception. Perception shaped the world we inhabit. He wrote, "The psyche is not a thing, it is a process, and this process has purpose, not in a grand cosmic sense necessarily, but in a functional one. The purpose of the psyche is to become itself, to individuate. This means to integrate the parts you have denied, to befriend the parts you have exiled, to recognize that you are not only the hero of your story, but also the villain, the fool, the victim, the sage." Jung's psychology begins with a simple, radical premise. You are more than you know, much more. And the journey of a lifetime is to meet those hidden parts, one by one, without flinching. The psyche is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be entered. Jung divided the unconscious into layers, not as rigid categories, but as deepening zones. At the surface, the personal, unconscious. This is the cellar Freud knew so well, the place where forgotten memories live, where repressed wishes hide, where complexes, those emotional knots, take root. A complex forms when a painful experience is not fully processed. It sinks, it clusters with similar experiences, and then, later, it activates a word, a face, a situation. And suddenly you are not yourself. You are reactive, emotional, possessed. We all have complexes. Jung had a father complex, a mother complex, perhaps a Freud complex. The goal is not to eliminate them, it is to become conscious of them, to see the complex for what it is, a fragment of the psyche with its own agenda. But beneath the personal unconscious lies something older, the collective unconscious. This is Jung's most controversial idea, and his most beautiful. He proposed that beneath our individual histories there exists a shared psychological substrate, a layer of the psyche common to all humans, not learned, inherited, structural. The collective unconscious is not a place. It is a set of potentials, archetypal patterns, instincts of imagination, just as the body inherits the structure of the eye, the heart, the hand, the psyche inherits the structure of the mother, the hero, the trickster. These are not images we create. They are images that create us. And they emerge spontaneously in dreams, in visions, in myths, in the stories we tell ourselves when the lights go out. Imagine a tree. The branches and leaves are your conscious life, your daily thoughts, your identity, your choices. The roots beneath the soil are your personal unconscious, your forgotten childhood, your unspoken fears, the things you once knew and now do not remember. But deeper still, the roots reach into a soil shared by all trees, a mycelial network, a substrate. That is the collective unconscious. Jung came to this idea not through philosophy, but through observation. He noticed that his patients, people who had no contact with ancient texts or myths, would dream images identical to those found in alchemy, Gnostic manuscripts, tribal rituals. A woman who knew nothing of Christianity dreamed of a fish rising from water and a voice saying, "This is the symbol of the god." A man dreamed of a cosmic egg splitting open to reveal the Sunday. These were not learned. They were emergent. Jung called them archetypal images, expressions of the archetypes. And the archetypes, he said, are the organizing principles of the psyche, the deep structures, the forms without content. The mother is an archetype, but your mother is not. She is the personal incarnation of that universal form. The hero is an archetype, but your struggle is not. It is the specific instance of that eternal pattern. The collective unconscious does not hand you a finished story. It hands you the grammar, the syntax, the mythic alphabet, and you write your own myth with it. Jung believed this was why myths feel true even when they are not factual. They resonate. They activate something in us that precedes culture, precedes language. They speak to the old brain, the dreaming brain, the brain that still remembers when gods walked among us. An archetype is not a picture. It is a magnetic field. It draws images toward itself. It shapes stories. It organizes perception. You cannot see an archetype directly. You can only see its manifestations. The mother archetype, for example, does not appear as one fixed image. It appears as the nurturing mother, the devouring mother, the earth, the sea, the cave, the breast, the womb, the container, the source. It can be benevolent or terrible, comforting or suffocating, because archetypes are not good or bad. They are potentials, and they carry both light and shadow. Jung identified many archetypes, some central, some peripheral: the self, the shadow, the persona, the anima and animus, the wise old man, the great mother, the child, the hero, the trickster. Each one serves a function in the psyche's ecology. The persona helps you navigate society. The shadow holds what you refuse to see. The anima and animus bridge the inner opposites. The self coordinates the whole. These are not metaphors. For Jung, they are psychological realities, autonomous factors. They have their own energy, their own intelligence, and they speak, not in words usually, in images, in dreams, in symptoms, in the people we project onto. You meet the anima in the woman who fascinates you beyond reason. You meet the shadow in the person you despise without understanding why. The archetypes use the outer world as a stage, but the play is happening inside. Jung's task was not to worship the archetypes. It was to recognize them, to dialogue with them, to prevent them from possessing you. Because an archetype, when unconscious, is a god, and gods demand sacrifice. Every morning you put on a face, not your face, a face. The persona is the mask you wear in public, the role you perform, the version of yourself that gets you through the day. Jung took the term from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in Greek theater. Each mask represented a type: the king, the fool, the lover. We do the same. At work, you wear one mask; at home, another; with friends, another still. This is not dishonesty. It is necessary. The persona allows you to function in society. It mediates between the inner self and the outer world. Without it, you would be raw, unfiltered, socially impossible. But problems arise when you confuse the mask with your face, when you believe you are the role, the competent professional, the good parent, the strong man, the nice girl. When the persona becomes too thick, too rigid, the inner life suffocates. Jung called this persona identification, and it is one of the most common forms of psychological suffering. You live for the role, you sacrifice the self, and one day the mask cracks, a breakdown, a crisis, a sudden realization that you have no idea who you are beneath the performance. The antidote is not to abandon the persona. It is to recognize it as one part among many, to say, yes, I play this role, But I am not only this role, there is more. Beneath the mask there is breath. Beneath the performance there is presence. And sometimes the most radical act is to take the mask off, to be clumsy, to be uncertain, to be real. Now we descend. The shadow is everything you are not, everything you refuse to be, everything you have exiled from your sense of self. It is the unlived life, the disowned desire, the forbidden thought. For Jung, the shadow is not evil, it is unconscious. It contains weakness, yes, shame, rage, lust, cruelty, but it also contains strength, creativity, wild vitality, the parts of you that were too much, too loud, too strange. As a child, you learned quickly which parts of yourself were acceptable, which got you love, which got you punishment, and you split. You became the good child, the smart one, the helpful one, the quiet one, and you cast the rest into shadow. The shadow does not disappear. It waits, and it leaks. It leaks in projection. You see in others what you cannot see in yourself. You despise the arrogance in your colleague because you have buried your own. You are drawn to the rebel because you have silenced your own defiance. It leaks in slips. The joke that cuts too deep, the anger that erupts from nowhere, the dream where you are the villain. Jung believed that the shadow is the first step in individuation. You cannot become whole without meeting what you have hidden. This is not comfortable work. It requires honesty, humility, the willingness to say, yes, that is also me. The cruel thought, the petty jealousy, the cowardice, but also the power you were told not to claim, the voice you were told to soften, the desire you were told to bury. Jung said the shadow is 90% gold. What you find there is not only darkness, it is energy, aliveness. The parts of your soul you have been starving. The work is to integrate, not to become the shadow, but to own it, to bring it into dialogue, to say, I see you, you are part of me, and I will no longer pretend you do not exist. Inside every man, Jung said, there lives a woman. Inside every woman, a man. Not literally, not biologically, but psychologically. He called these inner figures the Anima and Animus, the soul images, the contra-sexual archetypes. The anima is the feminine principle in a man's psyche. She is his connection to feeling, to intuition, to the unconscious, to the irrational. The animus is the masculine principle in a woman's psyche. He is her connection to thinking, to assertion, to logos, to meaning. These are not stereotypes, though Jung's language sometimes sounds that way to modern ears. He was describing psychological functions, not gender roles. The anima mediates between a man's ego and his unconscious. She appears in dreams as the lover, the muse, the witch, the guide. When she is unconscious, she possesses him. He becomes moody, sentimental, irrational, swept by emotions he cannot name. When she is integrated, she becomes a bridge, a source of creativity, a depth of feeling. The animus mediates between a woman's ego and her unconscious. He appears in dreams as the hero, the father, the judge, the wise man. When he is unconscious, he possesses her. She becomes opinionated, rigid, judgmental, dominated by an inner voice of harsh certainty. When he is integrated, he becomes a source of clarity, conviction, spiritual strength. Both the anima and animus have developmental stages. At first, they are primitive, the anima as seductress, the animus as brute. Then they evolve, the anima as romantic ideal, the animus as leader, then deeper, the anima as guide to the soul, the animus as carrier of meaning. And finally, they become what Jung called the syzygy, the union of opposites, the inner marriage. This is not a romantic relationship, it is an alchemical one. The anima and animus are the inner partners, the inner tension, the poles between which the psyche generates its energy. And to know them is to stop projecting them onto others, to stop seeking in a partner what you have not yet found in yourself. At the center of the psyche is an archetype unlike any other. Jung called it the self, not the ego, not the I that thinks and chooses and identifies. The self is the organizing center of the entire psyche, conscious and unconscious, personal and collective. It is the totality, the whole, the integrated personality that is both goal and ground. Jung borrowed a Sanskrit term to describe its symbolism, the mandala, a circular image representing wholeness. Found in every culture, every spiritual tradition, the self appears in dreams as a circle, a square, a cross, a flower, a jewel, a child, a wise figure, a divine being. It appears in myths as the king, the savior, the Atman, the Christ, the Buddha nature, the philosopher's stone. It is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It has always been there, beneath the noise, beneath the fragmentation. The self is the hidden order, the telos, the purpose toward which the psyche moves. And individuation is the process of becoming who you already are, of aligning the ego with the self. This is subtle. The ego does not dissolve. It does not merge with the self in some blissful annihilation. It relates to the self. It serves the self. It becomes an instrument of the self. Jung described this as the ego-self axis, a living relationship between the center of consciousness and the center of the whole psyche. When the axis is strong, you feel grounded, connected, purposeful. When it is broken, you feel lost, fragmented, alienated from your own life. The self, Jung said, is experienced as both immanent and transcendent. It is within you, and it is greater than you. It is the God image in the psyche, not God as theology, but God as psychological fact, the archetype of meaning, of unity, of the sacred. And the journey toward the self is the journey of a lifetime. Individuation is Jung's word for the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not ideal, whole. It is the integration of the conscious and the unconscious, the persona and the shadow, the anima and the animus, the ego and the self. It is the slow, often painful unfolding of your unique potential. Individuation does not mean individualism. It does not mean isolation or self-absorption. It means becoming who you are meant to be, distinctly, irreplaceably, yourself. Jung said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another." There is no universal recipe for living. Individuation is not a program. It is a process, and it unfolds differently for everyone. But there are stages, patterns, thresholds. The first threshold is the encounter with the persona, recognizing the mask. The second is the encounter with the shadow, facing what you have denied. The third is the encounter with the anima or animus, meeting the inner other. And the fourth is the approach to the self, the gradual realization that you are more than your ego, that there is a deeper center, a greater intelligence. This process is not linear. You do not complete one stage and move to the next. You spiral, you return, you deepen, and it is not heroic in the usual sense. It is often mundane, quiet, ordinary. It happens in the choice to stay with a difficult feeling instead of numbing it, to speak your truth instead of performing, to stop seeking validation from others and to listen instead to the quiet voice within. Individuation requires courage, not the courage of the warrior, the courage of the gardener. You plant seeds, you water them, you wait. You trust the process even when nothing seems to be happening, and slowly something grows, a sense of coherence, a sense of purpose, a sense that your life is your own. Jung believed that the second half of life is when individuation truly begins. The first half is for building the ego, the persona, the career, the family. The second half is for dismantling what no longer serves, for descending, for meeting the depths. This is the path, and it is not walked alone. The self guides, the dreams instruct, the synchronicities appear. You are already on the path. You have always been on the path. The question is only, will you recognize it? The unconscious does not speak in words, it speaks in symbols. A symbol is not a sign has a fixed meaning. A stop sign means stop, a dollar sign means money. A symbol has infinite meaning. It points beyond itself. It contains more than can be said. Jung distinguished between a symbol and an allegory. An allegory is a conscious construction. A symbol is a spontaneous expression of the unconscious. The cross, the lotus, the serpent, the tree, the mountain, the river, these are symbols. They appear across cultures without contact. They resonate at a level deeper than language. Jung spent decades studying the symbols that emerge in dreams, in myths, in religious texts, in alchemy, and he found patterns, recurring motifs, universal themes: the descent into darkness, the encounter with the monster, the death and rebirth, the union of opposites, the return home transformed. These are not metaphors. They are lived realities, psychological truths encoded in image. When you dream of falling, you are not just dreaming of gravity, you are dreaming of loss of control, of ego deflation, of the descent into the unconscious. When you dream of water, you are dreaming of the unconscious itself, its depths, its currents, its potential to drown or cleanse. Symbols cannot be reduced, cannot be translated into purely rational terms. Jung said, the symbol is the best possible expression of something unknown. To interpret a symbol is not to explain it away, it is to amplify it, to circle around it, to honor its mystery. He used a method called amplification. When a patient brought a dream image, Jung would ask, where else does this image appear? In myth, in religion, in folklore? He would gather the echoes, the resonances, the archetypal background, and slowly the symbol would reveal its meaning, not as a fact, as a possibility, an invitation. The soul speaks in symbols, because the soul is older than language. It remembers the time before words, when image was everything, and if you want to know your soul, you must learn its language. not by decoding, by listening, by feeling, by allowing the symbol to work on you. Every night you descend, you lie down, you close your eyes, and consciousness fades, and then the theater begins. Dreams were, for Jung, the royal road to the unconscious, not Freud's road paved with repressed wishes and hidden sexuality. Jung's road, winding, symbolic, compensatory. He believed that dreams have a purpose. They are not random firings of neurons. They are not simply wish fulfillments. They are the psyche's attempt to restore balance. If you are too one-sided in waking life, too rational, too controlled, too identified with your persona, the dream will bring the opposite: chaos, emotion, wildness. If you are too inflated, thinking yourself more than you are, the dream will humble you. You will fail, fumble, be exposed. If you are too deflated, thinking yourself less than you are, the dream will empower you. You will fly, lead, triumph. The dream compensates. It speaks to what consciousness is missing. Jung distinguished between big dreams and little dreams. Little dreams are personal. They replay the day, process emotions, work through immediate concerns. Big dreams are archetypal. They feel different, numinous, larger than life. You wake from a big dream and you know something has happened, something has shifted. Big dreams often come at transitional moments, before a death, before a marriage, before a major life change. They announce a threshold. They prepare the psyche for what is coming. Jung kept a dream journal for most of his life. He recorded not only the content, but his associations, his feelings, the context of his waking life. He did not interpret dreams mechanically. He sat with them. He asked, "What is this dream doing? What is it trying to tell me?" And he listened for the answer not in his intellect, but in his body, in his gut, in the resonance. Dreams are not puzzles to be solved. They are visitors to be welcomed. Sometimes they bring warnings, sometimes gifts, sometimes simply presence. The practice is not to master the dream. It is to enter into dialogue with it, to ask, "Who are you? What do you want? Why have you come?" And to wait, to let the dream speak in its own time. Jung discovered something strange during his confrontation with the unconscious. He found that he could meet the figures in his psyche not only in dreams, but while awake. He could close his eyes, relax, and allow images to arise, figures, scenes, entire dramas, and he could interact with them, speak to them, ask them questions, listen to their answers. He called this active imagination. It is not meditation. Meditation empties the mind. Active imagination fills it, but with images from the unconscious, not the ego. It is not fantasy. Fantasy is controlled by the ego. Active imagination allows the unconscious to take the lead. The process is simple and profoundly difficult. You sit, you quiet the rational mind, you invoke an image or a figure from a dream, or you simply wait for something to appear, and then you engage. You do not direct, you do not force. You allow the image its autonomy, its own life. If a figure appears, you speak to it. You ask its name, its purpose, why it has come, and you listen. Not with your ears, with your intuition, with your feeling. Sometimes the figure will answer in words, sometimes in gestures, sometimes in silence. Jung found that the figures of the psyche have their own intelligence, their own will. They are not puppets. They are autonomous complexes, fragments of the self, and to dialogue with them is to dialogue with parts of yourself you did not know existed. Jung used this method throughout his life. He would draw the images, paint them, write down the conversations. This was not art therapy. It was ontological work, work with being, and it transformed him. One of the central figures he encountered was Philemon, an old man with the wings of a kingfisher, a wise guide. Philemon taught Jung that thoughts are not always his own, that the psyche contains voices, perspectives, wisdoms that belong to something greater. Philemon said, "I am real. I am as real as you are." And Jung came to believe him, not literally, but psychologically. The inner figures are real in the sense that they act, they affect, they guide, and to ignore them is to live half a life. So let us pause here. Let us practice. Close your eyes. Breathe. Let your body settle. Imagine a path, a simple path in a forest, or by the sea, or through a meadow, wherever feels right. You are walking this path, slowly, no hurry, and ahead you see a figure. You do not yet know who it is, but you know it is waiting for you. You approach, and as you do, the figure becomes clearer. What does it look like? Is it human, animal, something else? When you are close enough, you stop and you ask, "Who are you?" Wait. Listen. If the figure speaks, hear it. If it gestures, watch. If it is silent, feel the silence. You may ask another question. Why have you come? Again, wait. Do not rush. Do not fill the space with your own thoughts. When the encounter feels complete, you thank the figure. You turn and you walk back along the path. And you return here, to this moment, to this breath. Open your eyes when you are ready. What you encountered may be simple, may be strange, may be nothing at all. That is fine. This is a practice. It deepens over time. But know this, the inner figures are patient. They will return. They always do. There are moments when the world speaks. You think of a friend you have not seen in years, and that day they call. You dream of a symbol, and the next morning you see it on the side of a bus, in a book, on a stranger's shirt. You wrestle with a question, and then, unbidden, the answer arrives, not through logic, through coincidence. Jung called this synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence, the acausal connecting principle. He did not claim to explain it. He claimed to observe it, to honor it. For Jung, synchronicity was evidence that the psyche is not confined to the skull, that there is a connection mysterious, intermittent, undeniable between the inner world and the outer world. Synchronicity occurs when an inner state, a thought, a feeling, a dream, coincides with an outer event in a way that cannot be explained by cause and effect. The connection is meaning, not mechanism. Jung first took synchronicity seriously after an encounter with a patient. She was telling him a dream about a golden scarab, a beetle, a symbol of rebirth in ancient Egypt. As she spoke, Jung heard a tapping at the window. He opened it, and a scarab beetle flew into the room. The odds were vanishingly small. The meaning was undeniable. Jung began to collect examples. He studied the I Ching, astrology, divination systems, not because he believed in them as predictive tools, but because they operated on the principle of synchronicity. They assumed that the outer world reflects the inner world at a given moment. Jung partnered with the physicist Wolfgang Pauli to explore this. They wondered if there might be a deeper order, a unus mundus, a unified world where psyche and matter are not separate, but two aspects of a single reality. This was speculative. Jung knew it, but he also knew that the rational worldview was incomplete. There are patterns that logic cannot touch, connections that causality cannot explain, and sometimes, in moments of deep need, the world conspires. You walk into the right bookstore, meet the right person, hear the right song. Jung advised, pay attention, not superstitiously, but with openness. When synchronicity occurs, it is often a sign that the psyche is activated, that something is trying to emerge, that you are at a threshold. Do not dismiss the coincidence. Do not explain it away. Sit with it. Ask, what is this pointing toward? What wants to be born? The world is not dead matter. It is alive, ensouled, responsive, and you are part of its dreaming. Jung noticed early in his career that people process reality differently, not better or worse, differently. Some people lead with logic, others with emotion. Some are grounded in the present, others see the future. He developed a typology, a map of how consciousness orients itself. He identified two attitudes, introversion and extroversion. Introversion means the psychic energy moves inward toward the subject, toward inner reflection. Extroversion means the psychic energy moves outward toward the object, toward the external world. Neither is superior. Each has its strengths, each has its shadow. He also identified four functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. Thinking evaluates through logic, true or false, consistent or inconsistent. Feeling evaluates through values, good or bad, harmonious or discordant. Sensation perceives through the senses, what is real, tangible, present. Intuition perceives through the unconscious, what might be, what is hidden, what is possible. Each person has a dominant function and an inferior function, the one you rely on least, the one that operates unconsciously. If you are a thinking type, your inferior function is feeling. You may struggle with emotions, dismiss them as irrational until they erupt. If you are a sensation type, your inferior function is intuition. You may dismiss hunches, focus only on facts, until you miss the bigger picture. Jung's typology is not a personality test. It is a developmental map. The goal is not to perfect your dominant function. It is to develop the others, to become more whole, to integrate thinking and feeling, sensation and intuition, introversion and extroversion. This is difficult. The inferior function is clumsy, embarrassing. It comes out in primitive ways, but it also contains vitality, a connection to the unconscious, a path to depth. Jung said, the inferior function is the door to the unconscious. To develop it is to open that door. And what you find there is not weakness, it is life. Jung was often accused of being a mystic. He denied it. But he also did not deny the spiritual. He saw the psyche as inherently religious, not in a dogmatic sense, in a functional sense. Religion, he said, comes from the Latin religio, to bind back, to reconnect, and the psyche seeks reconnection with the self, with meaning, with the sacred. Jung distinguished between religion and creed. Creed is collective, institutional. Religion is individual, experiential. He believed that the decline of religious experience in modern life was one of the great crises of the psyche. When the gods are expelled from consciousness, they do not disappear. They return as symptoms, neuroses, addictions, obsessions. The psyche needs a relationship with the numinous, the transcendent, the more than personal. This can take many forms. It does not require belief in God, but it requires openness to mystery. Jung saw the self as the God image in the psyche, the organizing principle, the source of meaning. And individuation is the journey toward the self, the modern equivalent of the religious quest. It is not a rejection of religion, it is a deepening, a personalization. Jung said, "I do not believe, I know." He did not mean he had proof. He meant he had experience. Experience of the numinous, the uncanny, the synchronistic, the archetypal. He had descended into the depths and returned, and he knew something lived there, not a doctrine, a presence. And that presence, he believed, is the birthright of every human being. You do not need a church. You do not need a priest. You need only the courage to look within and to listen. In the later years of his life, Jung became fascinated with alchemy, not the literal quest to turn lead into gold, the symbolic quest, the opus, the great work. He saw in the alchemical texts a parallel to the process of individuation, the transformation of the psyche. The alchemists spoke of the prima materia, the raw, unformed substance, chaos, the beginning. They spoke of the stages of transformation, nigredo, albedo, rubedo, blackening, whitening, reddening, and they spoke of the philosopher's stone, the goal, the unity, the perfected substance. Jung realized these were not instructions for chemistry. They were projections of the unconscious, descriptions of the soul's journey. The nigredo is the encounter with the shadow, the descent into darkness, the confrontation with what is rotten, decayed, rejected. The albedo is the purification, the washing, the separation of the subtle from the gross. The rubedo is the union, the integration, the marriage of opposites, the inner wedding, and the philosopher's stone is the self, the goal of individuation. Jung wrote a massive work on alchemy, psychology and alchemy. He studied hundreds of texts, illuminated manuscripts, engravings, and he found in them a language that modern psychology had lost, a language of transformation, of mystery, of the sacred made manifest in matter. Alchemy taught Jung that transformation is not abstract. It happens in the body, in the emotions, in the imagination. It is visceral, somatic, embodied, and it requires patience, time, the slow cooking, the containment. The alchemists called this the vessel, the alembic, the crucible. Without a container, the transformation cannot happen. The energy dissipates. In psychological terms, the vessel is the temenos, the sacred space, the therapeutic relationship, the commitment to the work. You cannot rush the opus. You cannot skip stages. You must descend into the nigredo. You must stay in the darkness. You must allow the dissolution. Only then comes the albedo, the light, the clarity, and only then the rubedo, the fire, the union. Jung's alchemical imagination gave him a way to speak about the unspeakable, to honor the mystery without reducing it, and it remains one of his most profound contributions. The hero's journey is the oldest story. It appears in every culture, every mythology, every sacred text. A hero leaves home, faces a dragon, descends into the underworld, returns transformed. Jung saw this not as entertainment, as psychology. The hero is the ego, the dragon is the unconscious, the journey is individuation. At the beginning, the hero is identified with the collective, the tribe, the family, the persona. Then comes the call to adventure, a disruption, a crisis, something that cannot be ignored. The hero resists. There is always resistance. The known is safe, the unknown is terrifying. But eventually, the hero must go, must leave the village, must cross the threshold. And on the other side, the hero meets the shadow, the monster, the thing that has been feared and avoided. The task is not to destroy the monster. The task is to face it, to see it, to integrate it. Sometimes this means slaying the dragon. Sometimes it means befriending it. Either way, the hero is changed. Jung said, "The hero's journey is the journey of ego development, and then ego transcendence. In the first half of life, the hero conquers, achieves, builds. In the second half, the hero surrenders, descends, integrates. This is the deeper journey, the night sea journey, the descent into the belly of the whale. The hero is swallowed, dies, and is reborn. This is not metaphor. It is lived experience. You lose your job. Your identity shatters. You descend, and slowly, painfully, you rebuild, but not as you were, as something new. You lose a loved one. The grief swallows you. You are in the underworld. And then, gradually, you emerge, not the same, deeper. The hero's journey is not about winning. It is about transformation, and the treasure the hero brings back is not gold. It is wisdom. It is the boon, the knowledge that the darkness is not the end, that descent is part of the path, that you are more than you knew. Deep in the psyche, there are guides. Jung called them the mana personalities, the figures of power, the archetypal helpers. Two of the most important are the wise old man and the great mother. The wise old man appears in dreams, in myths, in fairy tales, as the mentor, the sage, the wizard, Merlin, Gandalf, the hermit on the mountain. He is the archetype of meaning, of spirit, of knowledge. He offers guidance, but he does not give answers. He gives riddles, parables, challenges. The wise old man represents the self's connection to the transpersonal, to the collective unconscious, to wisdom that precedes you. But he has a shadow. When he is unconscious, he becomes the know-it-all, the dogmatist, the inflated guru. He speaks with false certainty. He cuts off feeling. He becomes rigid, dead. The healthy, wise old man is humble, playful, paradoxical. He knows that wisdom is not possession, it is openness. The Great Mother is the archetype of life itself, of nature, of the body, of containment. She appears as the mother, the goddess, the earth, the sea, the vessel. She nourishes, protects, births, but she also devours, smothers, reclaims. The Great Mother is not safe, she is powerful. She gives life, and she takes it away. In her positive aspect, she is the good mother, the loving presence, the safe haven. In her negative aspect, she is the devouring mother, the one who will not let go, who infantilizes, who consumes. Both the wise old man and the great mother are ambivalent. They contain light and shadow, life and death. To encounter them in the psyche is to encounter forces larger than the ego, and the task is not to be possessed by them, but to relate to them, to honor them without surrendering your autonomy. Jung met the wise old man as Philemon. He met the great mother in visions of the earth, the abyss, the cosmic womb, and he learned from them, not as a student learns from a teacher, as a soul learns from the soul. A myth is not a lie. A myth is a truth too deep for facts. Jung spent his life studying myths: Greek, Egyptian, Hindu, Norse, Christian, Buddhist, indigenous, and he found the same stories, the same images, the same patterns, not because one culture borrowed from another, but because they emerged from the same source, the collective unconscious. Myths are the dreams of humanity, the archetypal stories that structure how we see the world, how we understand ourselves. The flood myth appears everywhere: Gilgamesh, Noah, Manu, Deucalion. The dying and rising god appears everywhere: Osiris, Dionysus, Jesus, Quetzalcoatl. The descent to the underworld appears everywhere: Inanna, Orpheus, Persephone, Christ's harrowing of hell. These are not historical events. They are psychological events, inner realities projected onto the cosmos. Jung believed that modern people had lost connection to myth. We dismissed myths as primitive superstition, as fairy tales for children, and in doing so we lost access to the depths of the psyche, because myths do something that facts cannot. They orient, they give meaning, they place the individual in a larger story. Without myth, life is random, chaotic, absurd. With myth, life is a journey, a test, a transformation. Jung said, "The myth is the public dream. The dream is the private myth." To know your myth is to know your purpose, your calling, your place in the cosmos. This does not mean adopting an old myth wholesale. It means recognizing the archetypal pattern that is living through you. Are you the hero, the wanderer, the healer, the sacrifice? Are you in the descent, the battle, the return? The myth is not outside you. It is the structure of your life, the deep grammar, and when you live in conscious relationship with your myth, life becomes meaningful, even when it is painful, because you are no longer lost. You are part of a story older than time. Jung was the son of a pastor, but he did not inherit his father's faith. What he inherited was the question: what is the psyche's relationship to the divine? Jung believed that all religions, at their core, are responses to archetypal experiences, encounters with the numinous, the sacred, the holy other, the mysterium tremendum. These experiences do not come from belief. They come from the unconscious, from the self, and religions are the collective containers for these experiences, the rituals, the symbols, the stories. But Jung also saw that religions harden. They become dogma, institution, power, and when that happens, they lose the living experience. They become empty shells. Modern people, Jung observed, suffer from a loss of soul, not because they are secular, but because they have no relationship with the sacred dimension of the psyche. They try to fill the void with materialism, ideology, pleasure, success, but the void remains, because the psyche needs meaning, not as a concept, as an experience. Jung's psychology is, in this sense, a religious psychology, not aligned with any creed, but honoring the religious function of the psyche. He said, "The gods have become diseases." What he meant, when the archetypes are not honored, they become symptoms, compulsions, addictions, neuroses. The unlived spiritual life returns as pathology. But the cure is not to return to old dogmas. It is to find the living symbol, the personal myth, the direct experience. This is why Jung valued dreams, active imagination, synchronicity. They are the ways the sacred speaks, unmediated, unfiltered, and individuation is the modern equivalent of the religious quest. Not to find God out there, but to find the self within, to bow to that which is greater than the ego, to serve the wholeness, to live in alignment with the telos. This is not narcissism, it is the opposite. It is humility before the mystery. Jung looked at the 20th century and saw a crisis, not just political, not just economic, psychological, spiritual. He saw 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the atomic bomb, the rise of totalitarianism, and he asked, how did this happen? How did so-called civilized nations descend into barbarism? His answer, the shadow, the collective shadow, the unacknowledged darkness of the modern psyche. Modernity, Jung believed, had become inflated. It worshipped reason, progress, science, technology. It believed humanity could control nature, master the unconscious, engineer utopia. But the shadow does not disappear because you ignore it. It grows, it consolidates, it erupts. Jung saw the Third Reich as the eruption of the German shadow, the return of the archaic, the pagan gods, the berserker rage. He saw the atom bomb as the shadow of scientific rationality, the power to destroy, the Promethean hubris. And he warned, this is not finished. The shadow is still here, collective, waiting. Every nation has a shadow. Every ideology has a shadow. Every individual has a shadow. And the work of the modern world is the same as the work of the individual, to make the unconscious conscious, to face what we have denied, to integrate what we have projected onto the enemy, onto the other. Jung was not naive. He knew this work is hard, slow, often resisted, but he also knew it is necessary, because the alternative is repetition, escalation, destruction. The shadow of modernity is technology without wisdom, power without responsibility, progress without soul. And the cure is not regression, not a return to the past, but integration, a psychology that honors the irrational, a science that includes the sacred, a culture that values depth as much as speed. This is the task of the next century, and the next, and the next, to heal the split, to end the war between mind and soul. All neurosis, Jung said, is a split in the self. A part of you goes one way, another part goes the opposite way. You want to be free. You also want to be safe. You cannot be both. So you split. You want to be loved. You also want to be autonomous. You cannot reconcile them. So you split One part becomes conscious, identified, acceptable. The other becomes unconscious, disowned, projected, and the conflict plays out, not in the world, in the psyche, in the body, anxiety, depression, somatic symptoms, compulsions. The symptom is not the problem. The symptom is the solution. The psyche's attempt to hold the tension, to contain the opposites, but it is an unconscious solution, and therefore painful. Healing, for Jung, is not about eliminating symptoms. It is about making the conflict conscious. To say, I see it, I am divided, I want two things, I feel two things, and then to hold the tension, to refuse the easy resolution, to let both sides speak. This is the work of active imagination, of dream analysis, of dialogue with the inner figures. You do not resolve the opposites by choosing one. You transcend them by holding both. Jung called this the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche to generate a third thing, a symbol, a solution, a new attitude. It does not come from the ego. It comes from the self. You cannot force it. You can only create the conditions, the vessel, the container, and then you wait, you hold, you suffer the tension, and eventually something shifts. A dream arrives, a synchronicity appears, a new possibility opens. This is grace, but it is also work. The psyche heals itself, but only when you cooperate, when you stop running from the pain, stop numbing the conflict, stop splitting, and start integrating, start owning, start becoming whole. At the center of Jung's psychology is a paradox. To live, you must die, not literally, symbolically. The ego must die, the persona must die, the old identity must die, so that something new can be born. Jung called this the death-rebirth motif, the oldest archetypal pattern. It appears in initiation rites, in mystery religions, in shamanic journeys, in the myths of the dying god. And it appears in the psyche, especially in dreams. You dream of death, your own death, the death of a loved one, the death of an animal, a house burning, a city in ruins. These are not prophecies, they are transformations. Something in you is dying, an old way of being, an old belief, an old attachment, and the psyche is preparing for the birth of something new. Jung experienced this many times. The confrontation with the unconscious was a death. The break with Freud was a death. Each stage of individuation was a death, and each time he emerged transformed. This is the pattern. You resist, you cling, you try to hold on to the old self, but the psyche will not allow it. The self pushes, the dreams intensify, the synchronicities multiply, until you surrender, until you let go, until you die. And in the dying you are reborn, not as you were, as something greater, more whole, more yourself. This is the mystery, the secret, the heart of individuation. You do not become whole by adding. You become whole by subtracting, by letting go, by dying to what you thought you were. And what remains is the self, the core, the essence, that which was always there, beneath the masks, beneath the roles, beneath the wounds, the you that cannot die because it was never born. In 1913, Jung began a descent. For the next 16 years, he kept a private record, a manuscript. illuminated with his own paintings, written in a Gothic script. He called it Liber Novus, the New Book. Later, it would be known as the Red Book. It was not published until 2009, 90 years after he stopped writing it. In the Red Book, Jung chronicled his confrontation with the unconscious, his active imagination sessions, his visions, his dialogues with inner figures. It is not a coherent narrative. It is a descent, a labyrinth, a madness contained. He met Elijah and Salome, Philemon, the Red One, the shadow of Christ, the serpent. He saw the murder of the hero, the crucifixion of God, the birth of the new God. He wrote, "The spirit of the depths forced me into the madness of my times." This was not psychosis. It was a voluntary descent, a controlled disintegration. He was dismantling his identification with the rational mind, with the scientific persona, with the Freudian system, and he was allowing the unconscious to speak, to flood, to reshape him. He emerged from this period transformed, with the foundations of analytical psychology, with the concepts of the archetypes, the self, individuation. But the Red Book itself remained hidden. He never published it. He feared it would be misunderstood, seen as mysticism or madness. And perhaps he was right. The Red Book is not a theoretical text. It is a record of an experience, a shamanic journey, a night sea crossing. It shows that Jung did not arrive at his psychology through logic alone. He arrived at it through descent, through suffering, through surrender. And it is a reminder: the psyche cannot be understood from the outside. It must be entered, lived, endured. Jung gave us the map, but we must make the journey ourselves. Jung was both a product of his time and a critic of it. He lived through 2 world wars, the collapse of empires, the rise of technology, the decline of religion, and he asked, "What is happening to the psyche in modernity?" His answer was complex, but a few themes emerged. First, the loss of the sacred, the disenchantment of the world. Modern people, Jung observed, no longer believe in gods or souls or spirits. They believe in matter, mechanism, economics, and this, he said, is a catastrophe for the psyche, because the psyche needs meaning. It needs connection to something greater. It needs the numinous. Without it, life becomes hollow, anxious, depressed. Second, the inflation of the ego. Modernity worships the individual, the rational mind, the autonomous self. But this, Jung warned, is a dangerous fantasy. The ego is not the center. The self is. And when the ego inflates, when it believes itself to be everything, it invites disaster, personal and collective. Third, the split between conscious and unconscious. Modern culture overvalues consciousness, rationality, control. It represses the irrational, the emotional, the instinctual, and the unconscious, denied, erupts in symptoms, in violence, in collective madness. Jung believed that the task of the modern world is to heal this split, not by regressing to pre-modern ways, but by integrating, by honoring both poles, consciousness and the unconscious, reason and soul. He called for a new synthesis, a psychology that includes the spiritual, a science that honors the mystery. And he believed that individuals who do the work of individuation are the pioneers, the ones who model the way forward. not by changing the world directly, but by changing themselves, because the transformation of the collective begins with the transformation of the individual. At the heart of Jung's psychology is a principle. The psyche is structured by opposites, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, thinking and feeling, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. And the task of individuation is to integrate them, not to choose one, not to prefer one, to hold both. Jung called this the conjunctio, the union, the sacred marriage. It is the goal of alchemy, the philosopher's stone, the self. But integration is not synthesis, it is not blending, it is not compromise. It is holding the tension, allowing the opposites to coexist, transforming the conflict into creativity. When you integrate the shadow, you do not become the shadow, you include it. You give it a seat at the table, you listen to its voice. When you integrate the anima or animus, you do not become the opposite gender. You honor the inner opposite. You stop projecting it. You find it within. When you integrate thinking and feeling, you do not become lukewarm. You become whole, capable of both clarity and compassion. This is the work of a lifetime, because the psyche does not want to integrate. It wants to simplify, to split, to identify with one pole and reject the other. But every time you do that, you lose energy, you lose vitality, you lose connection to the self. The self is the union of opposites. It holds everything, contains everything, balances everything. And to align with the self is to become more paradoxical, more spacious, more capable of holding contradiction. Jung said, "Life is a tightrope walk between opposites. You do not escape the tension. You learn to walk the rope. And in the walking, you find balance, you find grace, you find the center." Carl Jung died in 1961 at the age of 85. He left behind a vast body of work, collected works spanning 20 volumes, letters, seminars, paintings, and he left behind a legacy that continues to unfold. His ideas influenced psychotherapy, spirituality, art, literature, film. The hero's journey, the shadow, the archetype, the collective unconscious. These terms are now part of the cultural lexicon. Joseph Campbell built on Jung's work and gave us the monomyth, the universal story. James Hillman extended Jung's archetypal psychology into a poetic, imaginal practice. Marion Woodman brought Jung's insights into the feminine, the body, the soul, and countless others have carried the torch. But Jung's legacy is not just intellectual, it is practical. Thousands of people have used his psychology to navigate crises, to make sense of dreams, to find meaning in suffering. Jungian analysis continues around the world, in clinics, in training institutes, in private practices, and beyond formal analysis. Jung's ideas live in the culture. Every time someone speaks of their shadow, every time someone interprets a dream, every time someone recognizes a synchronicity, Jung is there, not as a guru, not as a prophet, but as a guide, a cartographer, a fellow traveler. He gave us a map, but he also insisted, the map is not the territory. You must walk the path yourself. You must descend into your own depths. You must meet your own archetypes. And in doing so, You become part of the living symbol, the ongoing process of individuation, the unfolding of the self. Jung's work is not finished. It cannot be finished, because the psyche is alive, and it is always speaking, always dreaming, always transforming, and you are part of that dreaming. We return now to the lake. The boy stands at the edge. The water is dark, infinite. He no longer fears it. He knows now what moves beneath. It is the unconscious, the collective soul, the archetypes, the self. It is everything he has spent a lifetime learning to see, to honor, to integrate, and he knows the work is never done. The journey does not end. There is always another layer, another shadow to meet, another opposite to hold. But he also knows he is not alone. He has never been alone. The psyche is companioned by figures, by symbols, by the quiet voice of the self. You, too, are companioned. The persona you wear, the shadow you carry, the anima or animus you meet in dreams, the wise figures that guide you, the child that still lives within, they are all you, and they are all greater than you. And the path to wholeness is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a dance, a return. You descend, you integrate, you ascend, and then you descend again, deeper. This is individuation, not perfection, not transcendence, but wholeness, the capacity to hold it all, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the clarity and the mystery. Jung's gift to us is permission, permission to be complex, to be contradictory, to be fully human, to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop splitting, and to say, yes, this is me, all of it, the broken parts and the beautiful parts, the conscious and the unconscious, the individual and the collective. I am whole, not because I am perfect, but because I include everything. So as this long night of listening comes to a close, let this remain with you. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. Your psyche is not broken. It is speaking, always speaking, in dreams, in symptoms, in longings, in synchronicities. And the work is simple, not easy, but simple. Listen, descend, integrate, become, not who you think you should be, but who you are, wholly, irreplaceably, yourself. The self is waiting. It has always been waiting, at the center of your being, quiet, patient, whole, and the journey toward it is the journey of your life. May you walk it with courage, with curiosity, with compassion. May you meet your shadow with honesty, your anima or animus with wonder, yourself with reverence. May you find the symbols that speak to your soul, the myths that carry your meaning, the dreams that guide your way. And may you remember, always, what Jung knew. You are not alone. You are part of the collective soul, the great dreaming, the unfolding of the psyche itself. Rest now. The work continues, but for this moment rest. The lake is still. The boy has become the man has become the sage, and the water reflects the sky, and the sky reflects the soul, and all is whole, all is well, all is as it should be. Sleep now. The archetypes are watching over you, and in the morning you will wake, and the journey will continue.